The obsession mechanic has existed for almost the entirety of Dead by Daylight's existence, and yet how it functions at the start of a match can sometimes be absolutely bizarre and illogical. When DBD first introduced the obsession mechanic, it was during the release of the Halloween chapter back in 2016. While this chapter contained perks on both sides that revolved around a survivor being the obsession mechanic itself was restricted somewhat. A survivor would only become the obsession if at least one obsession perk or add-on of some kind was brought into the match. Whether the perk or add-on was brought by a killer or a survivor did not matter. All it took was a perk like Decisive Strike or Dying Light to instantly create an obsession for the killer. However, if no obsession perks or add-ons were brought into a match, then there would be no obsession whatsoever. Having no obsession in a match provided useful information for both sides, as it meant zero loadouts on either side contained any obsession-based perks or add-ons. For example, this meant that a killer did not have to worry about a perk like Decisive Strike, while survivors on the other hand did not have to worry about a perk like Save the Best for Last. In patch 4.7 though, this all changed. In this patch, an obsession would now spawn every match regardless of any obsession perks or add-ons. In other words, the obsession mechanic was now built into every match, regardless if it was ever needed from a perk functionality perspective for either side. So if zero obsession-based perks or add-ons are brought into a match, how is the obsession determined at the start? Well, it's quite simple, just by random selection. There are 4 survivors in a standard match, and thus each survivor possesses an equal 25% chance to become the obsession. Becoming the obsession in a match that contains zero obsession-based perks or add-ons provides no real benefit other than sporting the obsession clause around your character portrait for the whole duration of the match. One subtle positive from this is that the obsession clause make it slightly easier to recognize when the obsession is in a chase. This was originally much more valuable before the survivor HUD was updated to include chase indicators for every survivor, but even now I still find it just a little easier to tell when the obsession is being chased. While the chosen obsession at the start of a match is random, there are ways to influence which survivor becomes the obsession. A survivor can increase or decrease their chance to become the obsession with a variety of different perks and add-ons. For example, perks like Decisive Strike and Object of Obsession spike the chances for a survivor to become the obsession. Meanwhile, perks like For the People and Blood Pact lessen the chances for a survivor to become the obsession. The exact percentages for increasing and decreasing your chances are not officially in any perk descriptions. However, DBD wiki pages state that each survivor obsession perk increases or decreases the percentage by 100%. This hidden formula is precisely where the bizarre behavior of the obsession mechanic becomes very apparent. To best explain what I mean, I'm going to reference a recent public match that I had. In this match, my loadout contains 3 obsession-based perks: Decisive Strike, Object of Obsession, and Medal of Man. Each of these perks increase the chance for a survivor to become the obsession. Rounding out the build is the perk We See You and a medkit with some simple charge add-ons. The main goal with this build is to be the obsession and continuously gain stacks for constant We See You value. This build quickly becomes less useful if I am not the obsession for at least a good portion of the match. However, in bringing 3 perks that increase the chance to become the obsession, I feel fairly confident that I can be the obsession at the start of a match and instantly get usage of my build. And this build is something I've used enough to where I can essentially expect to become the obsession, as it's fairly uncommon to have other survivors bring more than one obsession perk. So I have my loadout selected, and the match starts loading in. But to my surprise, at the start of the match, I was not the obsession. Instead, this random Tori became the obsession. Even though I was initially baffled, I concluded that Tori must be using a heavy obsession build similar to mine. So I spent the rest of the match wondering what obsession perks this Tori was using to overtake my chance to become the obsession. Once the match was finally over, I reached the endgame tally screen and rapidly clicked through to see what this Tori's loadout contained. And once again, to my surprise, this Tori was using not a single obsession perk of any kind. And so I started looking at everyone's builds, and there were 0 obsession perks to be found outside of the perks that I had brought in. Another survivor had brought in a skeleton key with a unique wedding ring add-on, but this only decreases the chance to become the obsession. After double checking everyone's loadouts, I was left completely perplexed at how Tori became the obsession when I was the only player that had an increased chance to become the obsession. And again, this was after using 3 perks that increased my chance to become the obsession. When adding it all up, my chance of becoming the obsession should have been at least around 300%, assuming the percentages the wiki has are completely accurate, at least. So what went wrong exactly? From my understanding, because at least 2 other survivors still had a built-in 25% chance to become the obsession, there remained a slim chance for another survivor to become the obsession. Does it make mathematical sense for a supposed 25% chance to be a supposed 300% chance? It certainly does not make sense to me, but this is simply the reality of how the mechanic currently functions at least. And believe it or not, this is not the first time something like this has happened. What makes this particular example so noteworthy is how vastly different the expected outcome was from the actual result. How is it possible for only one survivor in a match to bring 3 obsession perks that increase the chance to become the obsession and not be given a guaranteed chance to become the obsession? I can understand if other survivors brought in a similar number of perks like I did, then the chances would truly be a toss-up. Even with just one obsession perk like Decisive Strike being in another survivor's loadout, I can understand somewhat why they would become the obsession. But 0 other obsession perks being brought and there's still 0 built-in guarantee to become the obsession? This match is an egregious example of how the obsession spawn rules are very much outdated and need further updates. I am fully aware that in the grand scheme of DBD problems, this is a very small one to complain about. However, little problems like this being resolved can go a long way in improving the overall quality of life for this game. At the same time, that's also the funny thing about DBD, there's never not something to fix. Perhaps the obsession mechanic being so old, yet still managing to function fairly fine for the most part, is a big reason as to why it's not been updated. A slight refresh to how it functions would be a welcome change though. That's all I have for now, thanks for watching.